Fast and Furious used to be the kind of franchise you showed up to with zero expectations, and left actually happy. You turned your brain off, you watched cars do things physics would never allow, and a bunch of people yelled about family over dinner tables. It wasn't ambitious filmmaking. Genuinely, it was not that. But for me, it actually became my favorite thing on a movie screen. My first taste of this world wasn't the first movie, it was Fast 5 when I was a kid. And it completely blew my mind. It was so good it made me go back and binge the entire street racing era just to catch up. From the perfection of Fast 5 to the runway in Part 6, all the way to genuinely crying in the theater at the end of Furious 7. For that solid run of movies, it worked in the way that matters most. You cared. The cars felt heavy, the stakes made sense for the characters inside them, and you genuinely didn't know if these idiots were going to make it out alive. Then the 8th movie came out, and it just stopped working. The action became completely predictable. By the time I watched Fast X, the budgets had tripled, the scale got obscene. It wasn't necessarily a boring movie, but somewhere inside all that growth, the actual thing that made it fun just quietly left. That's the question I keep coming back to. How do you go from a franchise that figured something out, that had a golden era I used to rewatch constantly, to one that costs $340 million and leaves you feeling absolutely nothing? I'm Mac, this is Mackinflix, and today we're talking about the quarter-mile collapse. Before any of this existed, the franchise almost didn't get its own name. In 1954, Roger Corman shot a film called The Fast and the Furious in 9 days on $50,000. Escaped convict, hijacked sports car, race for the Mexican border. 4 decades later, producer Neil Moritz was trying to get a street racing film off the ground at Universal and couldn't land on a title. He tried Racer X, Redline, Race Wars, Street Wars, all wrong. He found Corman's film through a documentary, negotiated a deal, traded some Universal stock footage for the rights to the name. Corman kept the rights to numerical sequel titles, which is why the naming convention of this franchise makes no logical sense to anyone. Too Fast, Too Furious, Tokyo Drift, Fast and Furious, Fast 5, Fast and Furious 6, Furious 7, The Fate of the Furious, F9, Fast 10. The numbers disappeared because they'd been sold off before a sequel existed. The actual soul of the franchise came from a magazine article. Vibe, May 1998. A journalist named Kenneth Lee spent the summer embedded in the underground import racing scene in New York. Modified Honda Civics and Acura Integras. Young guys who figured out a lightweight turbocharged car can beat something twice its size. The man at the center of it, a street racer named Rafael Estevez, became the blueprint for Dom Toretto. His philosophy? That racing is a war, and you either bring the bigger weapon or you lose. Got polished by the screenwriters into I live my life a quarter mile at a time. Universal heard the pitch as Point Break with nitrous. They wanted Timothy Olyphant for Toretto. He passed, convinced it would bomb. Vin Diesel got the role, demanded changes, pushed for authenticity throughout. Jordana Brewster and Michelle Rodriguez didn't have driver's licenses when they were cast. Brewster had 1 week to pass her test or the production couldn't insure her. Once licensed, the whole cast flew to Las Vegas for Formula One driving instruction. Paul Walker, by every account, was just naturally fast. Nobody needed to teach him anything. The first film opened June 2001, $207 million worldwide on a $38 million budget. Critics gave it 55% on Rotten Tomatoes, and audiences didn't care. The world felt lived in, the stakes matched the characters, and you had a gritty crime film about street racers stealing from trucks on an empty highway. The action was genuinely simple. 1 empty road, 2 cars, a crossbow, or a baseball bat, or a tranquilizer dart. That's the whole toolkit. It sounds thin, but it worked because the scale made sense. A crew of street racers could die over stolen DVD players, and you felt it. When the scale matches the characters, you feel every inch of it. That's something the franchise eventually forgot. The first 3 films feel like a franchise trying to find itself in the wrong shoes. Diesel walked away after the first one to pursue bigger projects. That left Universal with a choice: shelve it or build a sequel around Walker alone. They went with the sequel. Too Fast, Too Furious, 2003. John Singleton directing. $236 million worldwide. Actually more than the original, which tells you critics don't always predict what audiences do. Critics gave it 37%, and they were right about the problem. The chemistry that made the first film click came from 4 people. Walker alone in a different city with a brand new supporting cast is a fundamentally different experience. Visually loud, story paper thin, Walker carrying weight the first film split between everyone. What Too Fast did give you, Tyrese Gibson as Roman Pierce and Ludacris as Tej Parker. At the time, they felt like substitutes for what was missing. Eventually, they'd become a reason to show up. Tokyo Drift, 2006. No Walker, no Diesel. Entirely new cast, entirely new country. Lucas Black as Sean Boswell, a teenager shipped to Japan who discovers drift racing, which is a completely different discipline from drag racing. Drag racing is about straight-line speed. Drift racing is about controlled sliding. You're trying to stay sideways as long as possible without spinning out. Director Justin Lin took over the franchise here, and he'd become the most important creative voice in it for the next decade. You have to give Tokyo Drift credit for actually trying something different. The story is the same story, though. Fish-out-of-water kid dropped into a foreign racing world full of crime. Same beats, different country. The franchise still hadn't found characters worth building itself around. $158 million worldwide. Fine for the budget. Test screenings were bad enough that Universal negotiated a last-minute Diesel cameo, 60 seconds at the very end, just to give audiences something to hold on to. The way people responded to those 60 seconds told the studio everything it needed to know. Lin also made one casting decision here that mattered more than anything else in the film. A character originally written for rapper Bow Wow got reimagined as an Asian American street racer named Han Sol-oh, played by Sung Kang. Han became one of the most beloved supporting characters in the franchise's history. We'll come back to what happened to him. Fast and Furious, 2009. Justin Lin, the original four back together. $360 million worldwide, the biggest return the franchise had ever seen up to that point. Critics gave it 28%, the lowest score in franchise history. Audiences came anyway because they wanted those four people on screen together again. This film also does something almost nobody talks about. For 3 movies, Dom Toretto only existed when Brian was in the scene. He was kept at arm's length, defined by how Brian saw him, never quite his own person. The 2009 film changes that. For the first time, you follow Dom's own perspective, his fears, his motivations. He stops being a mysterious figure in someone else's story and starts being an actual lead. The franchise worked for the next decade largely because of that shift. The film ends on the beat that defines everything that follows. After 3 movies of Brian straddling the line between cop and criminal, he finally picks a side. He blows up his career as an undercover agent to break Dom out of prison. 3 films of internal tension, one choice. He picks family. Every dinner table scene, every speech about loyalty, every use of the word familia.
Salute me, familia.
Salute.
It all traces back to that moment. The street racing format had run out of road creatively, and Universal could see it. Co-chairman Donna Langley delivered the mandate to Lin and writer Chris Morgan. Pivot to a heist format or shut it down. Fast 5, 2011. $630 million worldwide on a $125 million budget. 5-to-1 return. 77% on Rotten Tomatoes, the franchise's first certified fresh rating, and a 91% audience score. Critics who'd been dismissing these films for a decade actually showed up. The whole conversation around the franchise changed overnight. The film makes one decision immediately that I love. It deliberately doesn't race. Dom wins a Porsche in a street race about 10 minutes in, and that's it. Racing is gone. After 4 films built entirely around drag racing culture, you'd think the obvious 5th move would be another race. The creators knew that. They chose to break the pattern. They watched the franchise build the same sequence 4 times with one element swapped out: a shotgun, a boat, a cliff, a tunnel, and decided they were done with that. Fast 5 is a heist movie. Ocean's 11 in Rio de Janeiro. The crew needs to steal $100 million from a cartel boss named Hernan Reyes, and the opening heist alone shows you how different this film is. Multiple factions working against each other, a ticking clock, keycard scanners, blowtorches, a truck yanking cars off a moving train. Old toolkit versus a completely new one. Every scene causes the next one. The crew executes the train heist. It goes wrong. DEA agents die. The crew gets framed. So they can't run, because running means walking into federal custody. Reyes controls the money they need to disappear, so they have to take it from him. Then the US government sends an agent named Luke Hobbs to drag them home, which puts the crew being hunted from 2 directions at the same time. Everything they try creates a new problem before it solves the old one. You feel the walls closing in because they actually are. There's a scene between Dom and Brian, completely still, where they talk about their fathers, what it means to build something, what they're fighting for underneath all of it. 2 minutes, no action. That scene is what makes the vault sequence mean something. Without it, the finale is just property damage. And visually, Fast 5 still had grime. The characters sweat. Rio felt hot and overcrowded and alive. Not a polished establishing shot, but a city with its own density pressing in on the crew from every direction. They improvised through impossible situations, like actual criminals figuring it out on the fly. The franchise hadn't become clean corporate spectacle yet. There was still dirt under it. Now let's talk about Hobbs, because he's the best thing this franchise ever added to itself. The role was originally written for Tommy Lee Jones. Diesel asked his Facebook followers for casting suggestions. This is genuinely real, and a fan named Jan Kelly suggested Dwayne Johnson. Diesel brought it to Lin, they retooled the role, and Johnson arrived as the best antagonist the franchise ever produced. Hobbs wants to catch Dom. Dom cannot get caught. No hidden agenda, no reveal 3 films away. 2 people on opposite sides of a clear line who are both physically capable of pushing the other one over. When they finally fight, throwing each other through concrete walls, it lands because the script spent 2 acts building that pressure. When Reyes's men massacre Hobbs' team, Hobbs aligns with Dom. That pivot works because the film made you understand who Hobbs was before asking him to change. Fast 5 also gave the franchise something it had never had: genuine constraint. A crew of wanted fugitives in one city, one target, one way out. When you can't go anywhere, every single decision matters. The films that came after forgot this completely. One more thing about Fast 5 that matters for everything that follows: the vault sequence. Dom and Brian dragging a 10-ton steel vault through the streets of Rio behind 2 Dodge Chargers is physically impossible, obviously. But stunt coordinator Jack Gill built a real vault shell mounted over a semi-truck chassis and filmed it on real streets in Puerto Rico. Real tires on real asphalt. Real stunt cars actually crushed. You feel the weight because the weight is actually there. Your body registers it before your brain has processed what you're looking at. Everyone loved it. It became the defining image of the franchise. And the message that sent, unintentionally, was lose more reality and audiences follow you. Right there, inside the franchise's best film, is the seed of everything that eventually killed it. Fast and Furious 6, 2013. $788 million worldwide, 71% on Rotten Tomatoes. The crew now operates as something between a private military and an intelligence asset, hunting an international mercenary named Owen Shaw. The set pieces scale up: a tank on a Spanish motorway, cars parachuting from military aircraft, a runway sequence at the climax that genuinely seems to run for 20 minutes. And the physical stakes hold. Characters get hurt. Plans fail before they work. The franchise also made a decision here that only paid off slowly. Han Solo was killed at the end of Tokyo Drift. The writers had used him in 4, 5, and 6 anyway because audiences loved him. Their solution was to set those 3 films before the events of Tokyo Drift, a parallel timeline that kept Han active while you, watching, already knew his death was coming. Every scene with Han in 5 and 6 carries weight the character himself doesn't feel. The post-credits scene closes the loop. It replays the Tokyo Drift crash from a new angle, and you see Jason Statham's Deckard Shaw dropping a cross necklace into the wreckage. The man who killed Han. A thread opened 7 years earlier, pulled tight in 30 seconds. Furious 7, 2015. Paul Walker died in November 2013, halfway through production. Universal had no precedent for this. They enlisted Weta FX, 1,500 artists and engineers, to complete Walker's remaining scenes using his brothers Caleb and Cody as physical stand-ins, digitally reconstructing Walker's face onto their bodies. Director James Wan refused to say publicly which scenes used the digital double. He wanted audiences to just watch the movie. $1.5 billion worldwide, 81% on Rotten Tomatoes. Theaters everywhere reported people crying openly. The ending, Dom and Brian driving alongside each other until the road splits, Brian's Supra disappearing into sunlight, worked because 15 years of these films had built up to it. 5, 6, 7. The golden era. Films that executed exactly what they were trying to do, well enough that you actually felt something at the end. The franchise then misread why that worked. The scale got bigger, so the takeaway was, bigger is the answer. 5 worked because the characters were trapped, and every decision closed off another exit. Once the franchise started scaling the wrong thing, the whole thing started to loosen. Feel it right away, but it was happening. Quick pause, if you're enjoying this breakdown, take a second to drop a like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps out. Alright, back to the video. Fast X was supposed to be the start of a two-part grand finale. Lin came into development with a clear concept. Dom finally faces the consequences of his past. The inciting incident was sitting inside Fast Five's own history. Hernan Reyes had a son. A man who spent 12 years watching his father's empire get dismantled because of Dom's heist. A villain rooted in something real. He never got to make that movie. During the pandemic, Lin developed the concept through remote sessions with writer Alfredo Botello, producer Jeff Kirschenbaum, and Universal executive Jay Polidoro. Those sessions turned into creative tug-of-wars. Ideas came from everywhere at the same time. Writers cycled through, Botello left, others got pulled to other projects, new writers came in to wrangle the script. Nothing ever locked. The creative ground never settled under anyone's feet. Then, on April 22, 2022, 1 week into principal photography at Leavesden Studios, Diesel posted a 19-second Instagram video from the set.
What do you think, Justin?
Week 1. Just finished week 1.
He's talking to camera. Standing next to him is Justin Lin, and Lin looks completely flat, uncomfortable, eyes somewhere else. The internet called it a hostage video. Having watched it, that's not far off. The following weekend, a closed-door meeting. A week later, Lin quit. Walked away from a payday reportedly between $10 and $20 million, told his crew his health was more important than the movie. Universal brought in French director Louis Leterrier. He read the existing script 4 times on the plane to the set, landed and was told the entire third act is changing. Could he rewrite the climax of a $340 million blockbuster that night? Leterrier immediately understood the problem. Change the ending and the setup no longer points anywhere. Change both and the second act becomes dead time. He described it as rebuilding the airplane while flying it. What came out the other side is a film held together with nothing. Jason Momoa plays Dante as a flamboyant, unhinged theatrical force, painting the toenails of men he's just murdered, operating on a completely different frequency than everyone around him. He carries every scene he's in. Critics called him the one reason to watch. That's the problem. When the villain is the only character still creating real friction, the film has forgotten what made it work. A real cliffhanger gives you something before it takes the plot away. Miles Morales at the end of Across the Spider-Verse is in genuine danger and the plot stops cold, but his internal question for that chapter, the struggle to define himself on his own terms, is fully answered before the credits roll. The plot pauses. The character's arc for that chapter is done. You feel complete even knowing there's more coming. Fast X pauses the plot and returns nothing. No arc closes. No question gets answered. Then Jason Momoa confirmed publicly that no sequel script existed when Fast X was released. Diesel had to post on Instagram appealing to Universal for a release date update. Fast X made $714 million on a $340 million budget. You need roughly $850 million to break even after marketing and exhibitor splits. The most expensive film in franchise history, and its worst financial return since Tokyo Drift. We'll come back to what that number forced. Think about how Fast 5 actually moves. The crew executes a train heist. It goes wrong. DEA agents die. The crew gets framed. So they can't run. Running means federal custody. Reyes controls the money they need to disappear, so they have to take it. Hobbs shows up to drag them home, so now they're hunted from 2 directions at the same time. Every single scene forces the next one. You feel the pressure building because each choice closes off another exit. The Furious 7 runway sequence is physically impossible. No airport on Earth has a runway that long. But every beat inside it has clear geography, escalating danger, a goal the characters are actively fighting toward. The absurdity doesn't break the film because the story underneath it is still holding everything up. Fast X moves like a different kind of film entirely. Dom appears in Rome, and then Los Angeles, and then Portugal, and then a dam. Characters show up in London, board a plane, the plane gets shot down, and then they're somewhere else. Each location exists because the production schedule required variety, not because the story demanded movement. The clearest example is Ames, Dante's inside man who has access and opportunity through the entire film and does nothing with it until the screenplay needs a final act shock. There's no story logic for his timing, just a writer's decision about where the surprise lands. When a film's events don't grow from each other, you stop leaning forward. You watch, but nothing pulls you in. Leterrier explained it himself after Lin left. Change the ending and the setup no longer points anywhere. Change both and the second act becomes dead time. You can feel exactly where the chain snapped in Fast X. When Vince dies in Fast 5, he stays dead. His arc completes. Rebuilt trust, one last betrayal, a bullet to save the person he'd spent the film trying to make amends to, and the film never undoes it. The loss changes the temperature of everything that follows. When Brian O'Connor retires at the end of Furious 7, he technically survives. The film treats it as permanent anyway. The road splits, the Supra disappears into sunlight. Theaters wept because the film committed to that ending like it actually meant something. The franchise spent years taking that commitment apart piece by piece. Letty's death drove Dom's entire arc in 2009. It was the reason he did any of it. Fast 6 revealed she'd been alive with amnesia the whole time. 4 films of Han's death carrying accumulated weight. F9 revealed he'd been alive the whole time, his death faked with government holograms. Shaw killed Han, then Shaw became an ally, then a team member. Every time the franchise reversed a consequence, it was teaching the audience that nothing here actually sticks. By the time Dom is trapped at the base of that dam at the end of Fast X, there's genuinely no fear left. Universal is not going to kill its most profitable asset. Everyone watching has already figured out how permanent death works in this franchise. And it's not just the physical stakes that drained out. Death stopped mattering. Betrayal got forgiven a film later. Sacrifice became a delay. The franchise drained consequence from its relationships at the same time it was draining it from its action. Those two things happening together left the audience with nothing real to hold on to. You can still watch, you just can't feel anything. Diesel reportedly maintained stipulations that his character couldn't cleanly lose a physical fight on screen. For a story to land, the hero has to hit their lowest point, fail, suffer, get beaten, before they earn the climb back. Pull that away and the arc collapses. The hero is never genuinely low. Action stops being drama. Stunt coordinator Jack Gill built a real vault shell mounted over a semi-truck chassis and filmed it on real streets in Puerto Rico. Real tires on real asphalt. Real stunt cars actually crushed. When cameras record real mass, you feel it before you process what you're watching. Your body registers the weight in the footage. The Furious 7 Abu Dhabi skyscraper jump is completely impossible, but the car interiors are real, the geography between buildings is readable, and the stunt work carries actual momentum. The Fast 6 tank sequence, real road, real destruction. You feel the impact because physical information is in the footage. Over several films, the franchise traded physical reality for digital spectacle. Gradually, film by film. F9 straps a rocket engine to a Pontiac Fiero and sends Roman and Tej into orbit. CGI stars, CGI atmosphere. No friction, no visible effort, no evidence of mass anywhere on screen. The vault sequence earns the audience's forgiveness by being honest. Real weight, real effort, real destruction. The Fiero sequence asks for the same forgiveness and puts nothing real in the account. The moment there's nothing physical left to register, the technique stops working. Fast X's climax is Dom driving vertically down the face of an exploding dam. Fully digital. Universal had rejected Lin's original third act concept, Dante piloting a colossal excavator machine that devoured and ejected cars. Too CGI heavy, too similar to Transformers. So they replaced it with something equally weightless. One cartoon climax rejected, another substituted. The irony of that decision is genuinely painful. In the first film, Brian and Dom want things that can't both happen. Brian admires Dom, betrays him, wants both worlds and can't have them. That tension is built directly into the relationship. The film never needs to manufacture drama because the drama is already there. Fast 5 takes that same engine and puts it between Dom and Hobbs. Two people on opposite sides of a clear line, both physically capable of pushing the other one over. When they finally fight, it lands because 2 acts of pressure came before it. In the early films, family was something these characters did. You watched them bleed for each other, betray each other, earn their way back, build real loyalty through years of shared risk. Trust had to be rebuilt after it broke. Sacrifice was real because it didn't reverse. The word family carried weight because the films showed you what it cost to become part of that circle. Later on, the franchise started saying the word as a substitute for doing the work. James Gunn put it plainly. You don't feel anything for the characters. And if you don't feel anything for the characters, you don't care what's going on. Fast X scatters its ensemble across 4 continents. Dom runs a solitary messianic storyline. Roman, Tej, Han, and Ramsey get framed for a neutron bomb attack in Rome. Letty ends up in an Antarctica black site. Nobody wants anything that genuinely conflicts with what anyone else wants. The word family reportedly appears over 50 times. At one point, the script swaps in familia instead, apparently aware enough of the crutch to wink at it, not aware enough to fix it. When Dante is the only character in the film still creating real friction, the film has forgotten what it was built on. The discarded Fast X ideas tell the story of a production that never found its own movie. Lin wanted to reveal that Dom's son was actually the biological child of Dante Reyes. Think about what that demands of the character. Could Dom protect and love the child of his worst enemy? That puts the word family in the exact position where it has to mean something under real pressure. Diesel killed it outright, incompatible with the character. I get why, but the version of Dom preserved in its place has nothing left to test. Early drafts also included a Legion of Doom, Dante assembling past franchise villains for collective revenge. A scrapped draft line for Dante. That's the best thing about you, Dom. Only thing you got more of than family is enemies. Better than anything that made it into the finished film. Lin's planned climax was an excavator, a colossal boring machine Dante would pilot through the third act, devouring and ejecting cars. Universal rejected it. Too Marvel, too expensive. They replaced it with the fully CGI dam sequence. One CGI-heavy climax rejected, another substituted. The Justice for Han situation had also been building for years outside the films. After Tokyo Drift, fans spent a decade arguing that Shaw killing Han and then becoming a friendly face without real consequence was a betrayal, that the franchise used his death for emotional weight and then refused to honor it. The debate got loud enough that Michelle Rodriguez publicly attacked longtime franchise writer Chris Morgan over his comments about it, saying he had absolutely nothing to do with where this narrative is or where it's going. The cast was undermining each other in the press over character decisions. The family was not together on screen or off it. People still go. Even after Fate, even after F9, even after Fast 10, the international box office numbers tell you that. Something is still drawing people back. My read is it stopped being about the spectacle a while ago. It's the emotional memory now. The franchise built real feeling during its best years, and that feeling doesn't disappear just because the films stopped earning it. People return to this franchise the way you go back to a restaurant that used to be great. You remember what it felt like when it was, and part of you is still hoping. The Paul Walker legacy is a genuine gravitational pull. Meadow Walker at Cannes isn't a PR move, it's real inheritance. The people in that theater shouting her father's character's name aren't responding to Fast X, they're responding to Furious 7. To 15 years of something that actually mattered. The franchise sold the idea of a chosen family built on loyalty and shared history. The audience took that seriously even after the films stopped. Fast X's shortfall, nearly $150 million off the break-even point despite clearing $700 million worldwide, forced a reckoning that was always coming, just earlier than anyone planned. For the final film, officially titled Fast Forever, scheduled for March 2028, Universal imposed a strict $200 million budget cap. Script drafts were coming in at $250 million. The studio said no. That cap is close to impossible to work within, and the math explains why. Diesel reportedly commands around $25 million per installment. Supporting cast members draw between $2 and $10 million each. Put the veteran ensemble back together and the salary bill alone can eat most of the budget before a single camera rolls. So you cut the cast. You reduce the scope. After a decade of nuclear submarines and orbital mechanics, reduced scope is a reversal the franchise has no idea how to make gracefully. Diesel has confirmed the production returns to Los Angeles. No international locations, no formal cast contracts signed as of early 2026. A 5-year gap between Fast X and Fast Forever, the longest in franchise history. Diesel has one non-negotiable on top of all this. Brian O'Connor comes back. A digital recreation of Paul Walker, likely with Cody Walker as a stand-in again. One of the most technically demanding and expensive things the production could attempt, sitting in direct contradiction to the $200 million ceiling. Meanwhile, Diesel keeps floating casting ideas publicly. Robert Downey Jr. as the antithesis of Dom. Michelle Rodriguez advocating for Matt Damon. Rumors of a role written for Cristiano Ronaldo. Stars negotiating legacy on Instagram, while the studio is working out how to afford the movie at all. In May 2026, Cannes hosted a midnight screening of the original 2001 film for its 25th anniversary. Festival director Thierry Frémaux called it a classic. The audience in the Grand Theatre Lumière applauded and wept. People shouted Brian O'Connor's name. Shouted it, like he was still somewhere. Diesel addressed the cameras on the red carpet and tried to describe what it felt like. A film they made 25 years ago, at Cannes, called a classic. How profound is that? Standing next to him was Meadow Walker, Paul Walker's 27-year-old daughter, representing her father at a celebration of his legacy. She'd appeared briefly in Fast X. She was at Cannes because her father built something that outlasted the films. The franchise built $7.3 billion over 24 years. Fast Forever has $200 million to close it. That's the collapse in one comparison. When people rewatch this franchise today, they aren't going back to the nuclear submarines, the space cars, or the CGI dams. They're going back to the Coronas, the backyard barbecues. They're going back to a time when a crew of nobodies in Honda Civics pulling off a highway heist felt like the most important thing in the world. That feeling came from friction, a bad choice that actually cost something, loyalty that had to be earned. 10 seconds where every single decision inside those 10 seconds made the difference between walking away and losing everything. When you give a franchise unlimited money, unlimited scale, unlimited road, the friction disappears. And without it, the tires just spin. Universal has $200 million and one last movie to find that grip again. Whether Fast Forever can cut the bloat, come back to Los Angeles, and remember how to be a movie about people instead of unkillable superheroes, honestly, I don't know. The math is against them, and the recent track record isn't exactly promising. But even now, more than a decade after we lost Paul Walker, people are still talking about that Supra driving off into the sunlight. They still talk about Brian O'Connor like he's just out there, somewhere down the road. The fans are holding on to something real, something the later films stopped knowing how to build. At Cannes, they weren't shouting for Fast X. They were shouting for something they felt 15 years ago and never fully let go of. Thanks for watching, guys. I really appreciate the support. If you want to see how another massive franchise completely forgot what made it work, click the video on your screen to see exactly where Jurassic World failed. I'm Mac, and I'll see you over there.